Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg.
I'm Joel.
And you know Teddy. We are here together to wrap up our month in reading that was January. How did your reading year get started?
I think it started pretty good.
Yeah.
I read a couple of books I've wanted to read for a long time. A couple of books you got me going on. So I had a good month.
Yeah. Mine was up and down. I had a slow start to the year because I had a bit of a lack of energy for reading in the beginning of the year. And then as soon as I got my mojo going, I had sinus surgery to repair a deviated septum. So it got going and then slowed down. So it's been a roller coaster already. And I'm sure the roller coaster will continue in various ways through the year.
I think you'll get back up.
I think so.
You're doing better now, so.
Yeah, it's going. And of course, Teddy has been delightful, and you have been delightful. So can I mention that we're filming this on your birthday?
Sure.
We're filming this on his birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
my boys, that's all I want.
Yep. So of course he's wearing a sexy sweater. I have to point that out as well.
This is Sean Connery.
Yes, we named the sweater Sean Connery. Or you named the sweater Sean Connery. You had already done that when I met you.
And then my other sweater's Daniel Craig.
Yeah. And I am wearing a bookstore t-shirt from Flint Hills in Kansas to honor the fact that you are originally from Kansas.
And Kansas City Chiefs are in the Super Bowl. That's a thing happening today.
Yes, and we're
doing
into
this
it.
Instead.
It is interesting, though, because you're originally from Kansas.
Yeah.
And I went to high school in San Francisco. So we keep joking that there's a rivalry in the house, but I don't think either one of us actually really cares. So
nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Teddy cares.
Teddy maybe cares. We don't know. So do you want to get to the book? So I read 7 books in January. Do you want to go first or second?
I read 6. So you read 6.
All right. So I will go first. So it took me a while to finish a book in the month of January. And when I finally finished one, I finished Crampton Hodnet by Barbara Pym. This was sort of spur of the moment because, like I said, I was having a really hard time getting my reading mojo going. I tried out a bunch of books and just read like 5 to 10 pages of them and really wasn't feeling in the mood for anything. And then I happened to go to my local used bookstore and they had a couple of Barbara Pym books. People have recommended her to me a lot on and off in the years. And I brought 2 of them home and just thought to myself, well, what if I try this one? And it worked. So it was a success story. I liked it. It was a good book to start the year off, although I tend not to be a person who really cares how you start the reading year. But this was a fun way of doing that. I will say, if you like Jane Austen and Edith Wharton, I would recommend Edith Pym, but don't go in expecting the romance of especially a Jane Austen. There are romantic elements, but it's not a grand sweeping romantic story, and I really enjoyed it. And in a Friday Reads video, I pointed out someone had colored in one of the chapter breaks, and I decided I am going to color one in, but I haven't done it yet. So isn't that adorable? I love that someone did that. Isn't it cute?
Yeah, you have the colored pencils out.
So. I do have the colored pencils out. So I really thought I was going to be doing artistic projects while I was recovering from sinus surgery. And no.
You had grand plans.
I had so many grand plans, yeah. And part of that is that I didn't realize, especially in the first week after the surgery, there's a splash zone, which is kind of gross. But like coloring would not have done well in that environment. So that was my first book. It was a success story. I recommend Barbara Pym if you have not had the pleasure at this point. So what do you have?
My first book was The Wager by David Grann. David Grann was the author of Killers of the Flower Moon. And it's a Arctic expedition of 1742. And, you know, I like that.
Was it Arctic?
Not Arctic. Well, it was down South America.
Okay.
Not quite to the Arctic, but 1792, about as far as I got.
Okay.
And I was really having high hopes for it. It was okay. But basically, the ship takes off. It's one of several ships. And I think they're more plundering for treasures and everything. And it just didn't really do a lot for me. It's really well written. It was very intense on what was happening on the boat. But they kept it's a true story. And they kept amazing logs for 1742. My stepmother read it. And it was amazing the details that they remembered and they got from this. It was good.
Yeah.
But they were selling it as adventure and murder. And Yeah, somebody got murdered and they got on trial and went to jail. That's
Okay.
about it. So,
And I think your stepmother kind of had the same feeling about
Yeah.
it. Like it felt like it was going to be more exciting, and she ended up a little bit bored.
yeah.
So yeah. So
But-
you're not alone on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was fun. So, what do you got?
So my next one, I believe I know what it is. Let me double check. Yeah, it's Morning and Evening by Jan Fosse, translated by Damien Searles. So Jan Fosse won the Nobel Prize for Literature last year, and I decided I wanted to read one of his books, but I didn't want to commit to the book that he's most known for, which is Septology. And people kind of get attitude because it's been published in 3 volumes, but it's Septology, so it's like 7 sections, but it's also, I think, 1 sentence across the entire book. So people like to define it in different, some people say it's 7 different books. Some people say it's 3 different books. Some people say it's 1 since it's, I don't know. So I just decided to dodge all of that completely and not commit to a really large work. And I read Morning and Evening, which is a much shorter work. It's very dreamlike. It was a little repetitive, and I liked it, but didn't love it, to be honest. And it is supposed to be the first day of a man named Johannes's life, and then the last day of Johannes's life. And it's very quick on the first day part. My beard is getting cleaned for me. So it's very light on the first day part. And I kind of expected a little more, but it is beautifully written, and I did enjoy it. So that was my second book of the year. What do you have next?
Keeping in the spirit of David Grann, I jumped into Killers of the Flower Moon. We had just watched the movie, which I really enjoyed, but Greg said you're kind of missing some of the parts of the movie by not reading the book. And I always intended on it. I just didn't quite get there. And so I read the book. The book was really good.
Yeah.
I liked the first part because you learn about the Native Americans and what happened to them. And then the second part was going into the murders or the FBI.
Yeah.
And then the last part, the third part was a little boring, is how David Grann kind of put everything together. And it was interesting, but I enjoyed the first part where you learn about the horrific things that happened to the natives.
Yeah.
And it did make some of the movie kind of fall together for me. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the book. A little horrific, I mean, for as much
It's
as you
horrible.
can. But the writing was really good, and it kind of filled in parts of the movie. So incredible. If you haven't read it, do kind of hear the horrific things that happened to the Native American people. But and it was in Oklahoma, so near my state of Kansas. So it was a good read.
Yeah. And I think because David Grann in the book is kind of seeking to do 2 things. He wants to tell the story about what happened to these Osage people, and because they ended up on land that had a lot of oil, and they had head rights to the land, so you can't purchase the head rights from them. You can only inherit it. So, all of the scheming and manipulating and murder that happened to get the land away from them. But also he really wants to use it as a case in point about the way to tell the origin of the FBI. And he's able to do both of those things, but I think especially in the context of the movie, the opening part about the crimes was far and away, I thought, the more interesting part. Like, I still think the part about the origin of the FBI is interesting, but it feels very separate to me. And then the third part, I think, could have been a little shorter.
Right.
It is interesting what David Grann found when he did kind of his own investigation. Teddy is really into something out the window. I don't know what. But yeah, so I kind of agree.
I felt it could have really handled, because the second part was talking about how the FBI formed. And honestly, the most they really did is it went from one name to another name.
Yeah, it was something else before it was the FBI.
Yeah, and I think there's better movies out there that talks about the forming of the FBI. So,
and it is kind of interesting because it shows like how ambitious J. Edgar Hoover was, and how kind of manipulative he was, and how he needed a big case to help make a case that the FBI would be necessary, and then the Osage murders was it. Yeah. So it is kind of interesting from that perspective, but it does feel like 2 different books in a way. So,
cool.
Yeah. My next one was...
I just pointed this out to you this morning, and I forgot you had read it.
Yeah, it was funny because he told me that this book was coming, and I believe it's supposed to be published in February. I think it's published February 13th, so I think it's still coming. But I had an advanced reader's copy of Float Up, Sing Down by Laird Hunt, and I was excited about this book because Laird Hunt wrote the book Zori, which I absolutely love, and it's a tiny little thing. It's really easy to fit into your reading life if you have not read it. So this is a story collection, and it is set in the same world as Zori. It's in the town that she lived in. And she does almost show up. It's almost like when there's on a sitcom, when there's a character that you never actually meet, but you almost meet. That's kind of Zori in these stories. And the first story I did like. It felt like it was setting up a really interesting way of talking about towns and gossip and community, and the ways that gossip in the community can lift you up or tear you down. And that's not ultimately what you get. It sort of feels like Laird Hunt had a lot of ideas while he was writing Zori for people in the town that he ultimately didn't use in Zori. So he turns them into stories here. And it just kind of feels unformed to me. So it's fine, but I didn't really love it. Certainly not on the level of Zori, although it would be hard to match the level of Zori. So, it was a bit of a disappointment from that, but it is still a good book, I would say. Although I would say if you're someone who is not a fan of story collections, this would not be a starting point. I would recommend going somewhere else to get a sort of intro to story collections. Not there. What do you have?
Next was a recommendation from you.
Uh-oh.
And I loved it. It was Tom Lake.
Yeah.
By Ann Patchett.
Yes.
And Greg's talked about this, but it's a novel of a woman named Laura who has her 3 daughters back at home and starts telling about her life. And Meryl Streep reads the audio, and she's phenomenal at it.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful as far as like family and working together and learning. You kind of learn these secrets about your mom that are like, wow.
A little saucy.
Yeah, a little saucy. I think that's what made it perfect to have Meryl Streep read it, because I think it really felt like something Meryl Streep would do with her kids.
Yeah.
It's talk about some of her beginnings.
Yeah. I would love a movie version with her and her daughters.
Yeah. But Greg got a beautiful copy that is signed by Ann Patchett.
Ordered from Parnassus Books, which is Ann Patchett's bookstore in Nashville.
Didn't you originally call to get her 2 banned books?
Yes, and they were sold out of them.
Sold out.
But I had wanted a copy of Tom Lake anyway, so yeah.
Beautiful book, great story.
Mm-hmm.
I just fell in love with all the characters, and the husband is kind of in the background, but he's kind of a main character, and he just seems like a really sweet man who just is kind of quiet.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. I remember when I first read it, I thought, well, that was really good. That's probably going to be one of my almost best books of the year. And the more time passed, the more I kept thinking about it, and the more I realized that the book was sort of sinking into my soul a little bit. So by the time we did our best books of 2023, it was in my top 10. I think it was like 10 or 9, maybe even 8. I don't remember, but it was in there. I'll link that video down below.
But I can see it because both family is important to you and I.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful family, and a lot of our past reads, my blood family is important and my chosen family is important. Yeah. And I love family.
Yeah.
And so this is a great book for that.
And I think I also love the way it talks about the choices that you make in life, because it's interesting. Like Laura's life could have gone a lot of different ways. She was an actress as a young woman. She actually was in a movie that was a hit, and ultimately left her acting career behind. And then a man that she had dated when she did a performance of Our Town ended up becoming a wildly famous actor. And that's kind of why, so you can see her life could have gone a lot of different directions, and her daughters don't quite understand the path that led her to be a wife on a cherry farm in Michigan. And her daughters are sort of at that point. And I think there's a really beautiful understanding of like Laura at the point of her life where she is looking at her daughters, knowing that they are sort of at this crucial point in their lives where they have so much possibility, but the more decisions they make, the more their life is going to be set on a path. And it's really beautiful. And I love the way by the end of the book, you appreciate the choices that Laura made in her own life and what has meaning to her. And I thought it was so well done. I love it. Yeah. So that's Tom Lake. What did I do next? So next I did The Woman Who Killed the Fish by Clarice Lispector, translated by Benjamin Moser. So this is one of those storybook ND books. It's meant to look a little bit like one of the old Golden books that you would read when you were a child. And part of the initiative is that they want to give readers that sort of sense of satisfaction and completion that you would get from a Golden book, where you could sit down and read something in a single afternoon. So I had read one last year that was a short story by Helen DeWitt that was packaged in this. And so this is actually 3 or 4 short stories by Clarice Lispector. I didn't realize that they take the form of children's stories. I don't know if they're like literal stories for children or if they're more kind of intended for adults but told in the style of children. I did not enjoy them. And I wish I had known that before I had read the book, because I probably would not have read it. I would have held out to read something else by Clarice Lispector first. So that was a bit of a miss. But it was nice to be able to read something in one day.
Yeah.
So that was my next one. What do you have?
My next one was another recommendation from you. Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant by Ann Tyler.
Yeah.
Another book on family,
Yeah.
but a little bit more dysfunctional and really horrible.
Yeah. Really kind of mean to each other a lot.
Very mean to each other. And I picked it up because one of the sons opens up a restaurant called the Homesick Cafe.
Homesick Restaurant, yeah.
And it just sounded really beautiful and fun. So I was like, I'll read it.
Because he has, I knew when I told you about that it was going to appeal to you, because he wants you to go to a restaurant and have the kind of food you would have had at home, the food that would make you feel at home and comfortable. And I knew that was something that you would respond to when I told you about that.
And it is. So it's kind of food I like to cook. And when I cook for people, that's what I want to cook. Mm-hmm. It's stuff to make them feel good. I don't try to do fancy or anything. Just homey. Yeah. And I love it. But the family is fairly dysfunctional and mean and horrible.
But interestingly, I'd say.
Yeah. It's a train wreck you can't stop watching.
Yeah.
So, good book, though.
I really liked it.
It's up there. So, and also the dynamic among family that don't necessarily get along.
Yeah.
But they still have a family bond.
Mm-hmm. So. And I think I really, the character of the son with the restaurant, it really, because he tries so hard to have like happy family moments. And it just never works out for him.
he always wants to put on a dinner party to make everything good. And no matter what happens, the dinner party is a fail.
It's like if you've ever watched Mary Tyler Moore.
I was just going to say.
Every time she throws a dinner party, it turns into a disaster. So yeah, it's like a running joke. Like every time he wants a family dinner, something goes wrong.
I see myself, and was it Ezra?
Ezra.
Yeah. I see myself in Ezra. It's like always wanted to do something big for the family, but the siblings always have to just mess it up. So.
Yeah. Everybody has other priorities. And
sorry, bros. But yeah, everybody has their own agenda and it just never works. And all he wanted is just a nice dinner.
Yeah.
So, fun book.
Yeah. All right. So what did I have next? Next, I had Leonard and Hungry Paul by Ronan Hession, which I, at this point, was in a bit of a rut because I hadn't liked the Clarice Lispector book. I was feeling very I had felt meh about Float Up, Sing Down, and Morning and Evening was just okay. And I had been struggling with the audiobook that I had been listening to, which we'll get to because I ultimately DNF'd that. So we'll talk about that at the end. So I needed a win. And Leonard and Hungry Paul by Ronan Hession was supposed to be a really sweet book. Bob the Booker talked about it in his favorite reads of 2023 and actually got emotional talking about it as a book about kindness. And as soon as I heard it was a book about kindness, I knew I needed it in my life. And I did really like it. And it did sort of break that bit of a slump that I was in where I needed a hit after all of those kind of meh books, and it did get me out of that. I will say I liked it a lot, but I didn't love it. I didn't love it as much as Bob the Booker did. I don't think I would get as emotional talking about it, but I did really appreciate it. The two characters are really interesting. They never actually explain why Hungry Paul is called Hungry Paul, unless I missed something. And that was one of the things about the book where it's like it takes things sort of at a matter of fact level and that is interesting and good in some ways, but in some ways you kind of like, I would really like to know why he's called Hungry Paul, though.
He was
But
hungry.
he must have been hungry. So they are in their 30s now. They are very good friends. They have very quiet lives. And it is a celebration of people who have quiet lives who might otherwise go unnoticed or forgotten or overlooked. And I do like that. And their arc is sort of Leonard meets a girl at work that he's interested in and kind of flirts with the idea of a relationship, which would be a big change for him. Hungry Paul's sister is getting married, and she is kind of encouraging her parents to. Hungry Paul still lives at home with his parents. And she is kind of encouraging the parents, like, stop babying him so much, make him get independent, because she's a little bit worried that the parents are getting older. And she feels like if people aren't independent, everyone is going to start relying on her at some point. And she's a little worried about that. So that's as much of a plot as there is in the book. It's a really interesting book. Again, it does sort of celebrate quiet in some pointed ways that were a little surprising, but I liked it. I would say I didn't love it, but it definitely snapped me out of that little rut that I had been in. So what do you have next?
My next book has some layers to it. My next book is The White Darkness by David Grann. I had a month of David Grann. But this is an interesting book. It's a nonfiction. It follows a journey of Henry Worsley. Henry Worsley was one of the people on Shackleton's Endurance. And you all know I love this book. So he wanted to kind of follow what his grandfather couldn't do to get to the South Pole. So it's basically his expedition of trying to get down to the South Pole to follow in his great-grandfather's footsteps and do something. And he really admired Shackleton a lot, and he wanted to do what Shackleton couldn't. I don't want to give away the ending. The ending is really traumatic and sad, but I'm happy for where the man got, and it was beautiful.
And it was short, wasn't it?
It was a short little book, and it was good. But he couldn't do it. But then another book I read a couple of months ago was The Ship Beneath the Ice, which was the finding of the Endurance that had sunken. So the book David Grann wrote, The White Darkness, tied in a lot of other books that I had already read, and it just kind of made it a fun read.
Yeah, as soon as you told me what it was about, I was like, oh, that is so you.
And really good book. David Grann's a wonderful writer, and he really brings a lot to the surface. So a couple of the people that were on Worsley's expedition were descendants of people that were from the Endurance.
Oh, that's cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
So that was my reading month. You have one more? Or?
I think I have 2 more.
Okay.
But they should be quick. So the next one was Dog Songs by Mary Oliver, which is a poetry collection that Teddy, I'm sure, could really appreciate. He is having a moment. He's being very sweet right now. He is so tired. We took him for a walk, but he doesn't want to admit that he's tired, so he's just ending up being lovey.
Yeah.
So I struggle with poetry, which you know if you follow along. I feel like at least once a year I try a poetry collection. So our good friend Libby is really into poetry, and she had recommended Mary Oliver, and then she actually gifted us this book. And it's very short. I read it in like an hour. I think you read it in an hour, but you read it in February.
Yesterday.
Yeah. So we'll talk about it again next month. And if you look on the left page, there's nothing other than illustrations. So it reads very quickly, and it's really cute, sweet poems about dogs and the love of dogs and relationships with dogs.
Will you read that one?
Little Dog's Rhapsody in the Night.
Yeah.
Okay. He puts his cheek against mine and makes small expressive sounds, and when I'm awake, or awake enough, he turns upside down, his 4 paws in the air, and his eyes dark and fervent. Tell me you love me, he says. Tell me again. Could there be a sweeter arrangement? Over and over, he gets to ask, I get to tell.
Love that
Isn't
poem.
that just cute?
That is so Teddy.
And that's so Teddy. I mean,
That's
he's
so
literally
Teddy.
been cheek to cheek with me for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, baby.
So that's a Teddy poem, and I love it.
So I would definitely say if there's a dog lover in your life and you need a gift, get them this book because they will get it.
And even if you don't like poetry, they're beautiful poems.
Yeah, they are. And there are some sad ones because she talks about dogs that have been lost.
Yeah. But yeah, dog lover, poetry lover, that is the perfect book.
Yes.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I'll talk about it next month.
So we actually keep it.
Yeah.
We decided to keep it next to Guinness and Jamie because they're in our hearts and now this book is in our hearts. Yeah. So. Yeah.
And
Teddy, who is licking my ear. And then you don't have anything else, right?
No.
Okay. Oh, what about him?
Oh, the last book I had was Him by Ellie Kennedy and Sabrina Bowen. It was one of my queer romance. Two men are high school. They meet at a hockey camp in high school, like freshman year. And they're best friends all through the hockey camp. And then when they go to their separate homes, one in Boston, one on the West Coast, they keep in touch. They send each other gag gifts, and they're just troublemakers from day one. During their college years, or their senior year of high school, they play one more game together, and they bet on something that is a little sexual. Well, they're straight, and it ruins their friendship. 4 years later, they meet again at a hockey competition, and they kind of rekindle the friendship. They overcome the thing, and it's kind of their life in hockey, coaching kids before they go off during their college years. And it turned out to be a really fun book. It was a little more steamier than I cared to get into, but just the friendship, the brotherly love, and the hockey.
Oh, bless you.
Oh, bless you. Was really good. It's the first of 3 in a series. The next one is going to be Us, and the final one will be Epic. And
it's a left turn in terms of titles. But
I know.
Hey.
And I'm starting Us now. So probably in February, our February wrap-up, I'll have Us.
Okay.
Going.
And then March, Epic.
Epic.
Which is just fun to say.
Yeah.
All right. And then my final book was the big one. So I was thinking, a dog just walked, 2 dogs just walked by, and Teddy is very into it. So I had been thinking to myself, as January was getting ready to come to a close, that the last few years, I always found a book that I really, really loved and ultimately ended up on my favorite reads of the year in January. And I was like, it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen this year. Like last year, I found The Inland Island by Josephine Johnson. The year before that, I think I found Matrix by Lauren Groff. And it's just been a couple of years that I've found a book that I really, the year before that was Fanny herself.
Uh-huh.
Or no, I read Fanny herself in February last year. But anyway, point just being, it had been every year I found a book I really love in January, and it hadn't happened. But the last book I read in January ended up doing that for me. It was Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano, which I listened to on audio. Maura Tierney read it.
Love her.
She did such a good job, too. She was so good with this story. So if you read the description of the book on the flap, it talks about Little Women being an inspiration. And if you read it knowing that, you can see the ways Little Women kind of inspired the story. But I would say if you're going to read this, do not go in expecting like a modern version of Little Women, because that is not what you will get, and you will be disappointed. But I would also say, if you are one of the people who was that excited when I read Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant, you should read Hello Beautiful. You don't have to pull it back out. But I was just generally pointing at his pile of books. Because I would say very kind of similar. It's a complicated family story, but the family is a little bit less mean-spirited. There are some prickly characters in it, but it's about family and connection and the way that changes over the years and the way it can be challenged. I absolutely love this book, and I'd say Maura Tierney reading it was chef's kiss. I loved it, and I think this is probably going to stay in my favorites of all year long. So, big success right at the end of January. And then the only other thing was that, so I had started the year listening to the audio of The Christmas Orphans Club by Becca Freeman. And when I was having such a hard time getting my reading year going, eventually I started thinking to myself, you know what? I think I need to try something else. So I dropped The Christmas Orphans Club and started Hello Beautiful on audio instead, and that kind of ended up working better. I would think it's a DNF for now. I think probably next Christmas I would try Christmas Orphans Club again. It's just the mood I was in, it was not fitting. I'm very much a mood reader, and it really wasn't fitting where I was at. Like, I kept getting annoyed with the characters.
Yeah, they're complicated, annoying characters, and that gets you on a good day.
Yeah.
And when you're having a bad day, it's just like,
it was not working.
not a good time.
Like, I was at a point where I was like halfway through the book and I was getting really frustrated because the characters just kept getting in their own ways. But that's the point. Like, the second half of the book, they're supposed to then start growing up, figuring things out, and it was not in the mood for that journey, so I had to put it down. But you read it and loved it.
Right. But
so
me growing up and being without family, I had dinner with my guy friends. It was Thanksgiving for Wayward Boys.
Yeah.
And we were all complicated. We were all growing up. We were all dysfunctional. Jerry was one of them. And it's just like, you just have a hard time dealing with everybody, but they're your friends, they're your support, they're your family, and you love them.
Yeah.
But they're a mess.
So I definitely would say it was a DNF, but I think it's a DNF for now. I think once we start getting back to the Christmas season, hopefully I think I'll be in a good mood for that type of book. Since I was having such a hard time finding something I was in the mood to read, it just wasn't something to do right now. So I'll probably get back to it. And that was January.
Yay.
So we are already 11 days into February because it's somebody's birthday. I have read 1.5 books that kind of fit with Black History Month. I have a couple of other things. I'm doing something Valentine's Day themed-ish right now. What do you have for February?
February, I'm having a really good month already. I'm loving it. I've read
it.
2 really good books. I'm just going to give a spoiler. One of them is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. I love S.A. Cosby. So if anybody out there who knows something that's comparable to him, pass it on. Because I've read pretty much most of his books now, and I love them.
Yeah.
They're disturbing, they're hard, they're dark, but for some reason it works for me.
Yeah, and you were even like trying to look up like neo-noir type books, and the recommendations you were finding online were not really working. So if you have an S.A. Cosby or S.A. Cosby-esque recommendation,
Yes.
he needs it.
Yeah, because I think I've read all of them, but one, and it's still on my list. So
Yeah, so
because he did Razorblade Tears,
which I
and
really need to catch up to this year.
that one you really need to.
Yeah,
And
that's one I would start with. Blacktop Wasteland.
Blacktop Wasteland.
Yeah.
Which was not my favorite, but still really good. And the thing is, I've seen interviews with him. He's really a sweet guy.
Yeah, he's kind of a bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a really sweet dude.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
Back before Twitter became a hellscape and I abandoned it, he was a good follow on Twitter. I should look to make sure if he's on Threads or Blue Sky Social. But I have an account on Blue Sky Social, but it's not. I prefer Threads, but I should see if he's on it because he was a good follow.
Yeah. And then we were in the bookstore today, and I found another kind of Montana-esque mystery novel series. So I'm doing my first one tomorrow, so we'll see how that works.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I think Teddy just fell asleep.
So,
He was so tired. We took him for such a big walk.
Yeah.
And he is a little bit like a toddler where he doesn't like to admit when he's tired. But he's tired. So let's get him to the couch so he can sleep a little bit.
So
But that's February. Was January, and that's a little bit of a preview for February.
Yeah.
And stay tuned for more. And we need to go because somebody needs to go have a nice little birthday dinner with this handsome sweater that he's wearing. Oh, he heard dinner.
And a handsome man on my side, so hey.
Yeah. So
And a handsome dog.
And a handsome dog.
Yes.
So let us know what you've been up to in the January, what you have on deck for February, all of that stuff. As always, we really appreciate your time, and we will be back. Until next time, happy reading.